I mean,
there were 185 ships here.
I can't imagine it now, what it must have been like, you know, sitting out here. It's so peaceful.
You talk about peaceful, that's what the sailors talk about. It was a Sunday morning. They were getting ready for church services, liberty, or maybe they had some light duty that day. It was Sunday in Hawaii. And this water that you see in its tranquility here was the same on December 7th.
Everywhere you go on Pearl Harbor, history stares you in the face. The Navy ships were not the only targets. The Naval Air Station at Ford Island still carries a lot of those scars.
Apparently, Japanese fighter planes came right above this hangar here, firing bullets into this hangar. I mean, could you imagine being an 18, 19-year-old man in here on a Sunday morning? You know, you're not even on Battleship Row and bullets come flying in? I can't believe they're still here. It's just another example of the ghost that you find all these years later here at Pearl Harbor. It's amazing.
To achieve accuracy, Dr. Goldstein suggested a research trip to the National Park Service Archive, right there across from Battleship Row on Ford Island.
This is really the last picture taken of the Arizona in a kind of a formal way. She's in her navy gray, which will be a kind of a medium gray. She will be painted later that year with a measure paint scheme that will put her in a dark blue gray and also a light gray tops just above the smokestack. So she would look a little bit different about 8 months after this photograph was taken. We're looking at the port side of the ship. The area of interest for this story is right up here, the forward part of the ship. This is where gun turrets number 1 and 2 is, and below it, the forward magazine. The bomb that struck the Arizona at Pearl Harbor is going to come in from the opposite side, the starboard side, and go right into the forward magazines.
It's a little-known fact that the Arizona was actually bombed twice. An earlier squadron managed to hit her stern minutes before, a detail that would give the final recreation greater authenticity.
Even though you're looking for evidence of what some people term a lucky shot, actually the bombing of the Arizona had taken place minutes before that unfolded. This is the destruction of the rear section of the ship, where one of the high-level bombs struck the faceplate of the rear turret, broke into pieces, went through the deck of the Arizona, exploded out the side after going through officers' country, and created this disturbance. Probably about 2 minutes after this, the bomb that will sink the Arizona will strike in between these two turrets, which are painted bright red. That bomb will land right in between those two turrets on the starboard side. One of the Arizona myths is a bomb went down the smokestack. As you can see, there is no destruction of the ring here itself.
It looks like a melted candle.
Well, that's what it was. Remember, this ship burned for nearly 2.5 days, and these decks were glowing red, and you couldn't even walk on them for 2 days.
Wow.
The only known motion picture images of the explosion that doomed the Arizona was captured in this footage, shot by Army Dr. Eric Hawkinson on a nearby hospital ship.
This is the USS Solace. That's the hospital ship where Eric Hawkinson turned his camera towards Battleship Row, and that is the Arizona right here. You know, sadly, the Hawkinson film was color, and only 2 frames of it exist, and this is one of them.
Not only has Hollywood consistently gotten the attack wrong, even the real footage was inaccurate. For years, this famous scene had only been seen in reverse. Now you'll see Pearl Harbor as it rarely has been seen, correctly.
During the war, someone printed it backwards, and every rendition of that from the archives is backwards.
That footage created an opportunity for a sound experiment to design an audio track to bring the footage to life. But for now, it was important to get the basic details.
So the bomb is offset.
Like the Japanese bombers and how they managed to sink the Arizona.
The way the Japanese did it was with 5 aircraft flying in a diamond pattern. The best bombardier at the front, and his rear gunner has a little pennant. And as they go over the target with 2 aircraft to the right, 2 aircraft to the left, flying in echelon, they become one bomber. And as they flew over, they would drop 5 bombs and bracket the target. Now, in those photographs, you could see where they missed the Arizona, hit the Vestal, water splashes, but you could see that there was a science to it, an effective way of attacking those inboard ships from nearly 2 miles up.
With a much deeper visual understanding of December 7th, the next step was to draw out the final recreation with storyboards for Don Goldstein's approval.
Here's what I'm thinking. We see Pearl Harbor, Ford Island Memorial today, and we dissolve, and it becomes Pearl Harbor in 1941. And we're seeing what the Japanese pilots saw as they flew over. And I'm going to reference all these ships are going to be referenced from photos that were taken.
Which will be easy to do, and you'll get the exact ships that way.
And I have other Zeros flying in down low, attacking it. Would that be accurate?
I'm not sure these Zeros would waste their time on that. These Zeros usually were there to protect, the planes. And so you could have a couple there, but I'm not sure you would see that.
Okay, so maybe I should eliminate the Zeros.
I think it detracts.
Getting the right planes in the right place was relatively simple, but there were still the other details, ones that needed immediate attention.
You better mention every ship that's there in the right position. I think that your big dilemma is that so many people are still alive that you better darn well have the ship in the right place at the right time, because if you don't, it'll ruin your show and the people will call in. This is the thing you're really trying to show, the real thing. And the real thing is, it's not as fancy as they try to make it today.
It's down and dirty.
Yeah, it's down and dirty. It's short and sweet. And it's none of this fancy stuff that you see in Hollywood, which is what you're trying to get away from. It goes down.
There was a lot to correct for the final recreation, from the direction of the attack to the details of the Japanese bombers.
We'll go through this again in a minute.
And Don Goldstein had more discouraging news.
Don, I am having a really tough time finding a Kate. Where can I find one around here?
I think the best place you can do is go to the National Archives and get a hold of an old picture, because they just don't have those. When you lose a war, you lose your equipment. There aren't any. None.
There's none?
None. None.
Even though there was no plane, no battleship, and no bomb, the necessary information was finally piecing together for Dr. Goldstein's recreation. Next, to create the proper perspective, the recreation would have to go the extra mile, or two, straight up, on what went down.
Hopefully we won't be coming back too quickly.
To recreate the most historically accurate attack on Pearl Harbor, and realize Professor Don Goldstein's vision to show the bomb that sank the USS Arizona on December 7th. It was time to take to the air and get the bombardier's point of view.
What we want is this shot from right up here.
9,800 feet over Pearl Harbor, the exact altitude of the Japanese planes at the time of the attack. It was necessary to get a bigger helicopter than normal.
The Bell 407 is an amazing helicopter. It has 4 blades, which makes it very smooth. It also makes it very powerful and climb up to 10,000 feet very quickly.
This is a Tyler mount, which enables us to control this camera from inside the helicopter, tilting it up and down, zooming it in and out, and it'll give us that aerial shot that we need.
The helicopter got off the ground at roughly the same time the Japanese would have been coming over Oahu.
What's our altitude right now?
We're at 1,000 climbing to 9,800.
You can just imagine on that day there were just so many ships.
60 seconds would be enough footage to cover any CGI. But there were camera issues.
Dennis, the camera looks soft from back here. Well, I back focused it before we took off. I don't know what I can do at this point.
It's not like you can crawl out on the nose and tweak the lens.
Josh, we want to land and check the camera, okay?
Roger that, setting for landing.
So the chopper had to land. Once on the ground, the lens was readjusted and allowed to unfog. And then the chopper got back in the air to get the bombardier shot.
What's our altitude?
9,800.
All right, this is perfect. This is exactly right. Is this pulled back as far as possible?
Roger that.
So look, This is exactly the shot. This is what it would have looked like. Unbelievable. It's actually bigger than what you'd think it would be. It's smaller than I thought. Way smaller. It's like smaller than a dime. I can't imagine dropping something and to actually hit it from this height. Yeah, but you have to remember they were going into the headwind and then they were bracketing with those 5 different planes. Okay, if we can hold right here for the next 60 seconds. This is perfect. The Arizona is dead center, right in the center of the bomb site. Bombs away. Focus is better. Peter, this is great. I think we've got it. Let's go in.
The bombardier's point of view was now in the can. But there was still the issue of where to find a battleship to stand in for the Arizona in the recreation. The USS Missouri is right there at Battleship Row. But she's the wrong class, a much later ship. Daniel Martinez had an interesting solution.
There is still a sterling example of these types of battleships, not this particular class, but this type of battleship, and that's the Battleship Texas that you would find near San Jacinto Battlefield near Houston, Texas, where the finest example of that ship can be found.
The USS Texas had a long, distinguished career, the oldest remaining dreadnought. She served in both World Wars. While the USS Arizona and Texas are similar to the untrained eye, the Arizona was longer and heavier, and one of the most distinct differences was the configuration of her turrets. The Texas had 2 14-inch guns per turret, while the Arizona held 3 guns in each. The bomb that hit the Arizona was on a delayed action fuse and penetrated 2 decks before blowing up the forward magazine.
This was the general area. The bomb hit somewhere around here. It went down through the deck, armor piercing, went in, hit the ammunition stores.
Where did it hit?
And blew it. Somewhere in here. I can't tell you the exact spot, but it'll be somewhere around here.
Anywhere around here?
Yeah.
I'm doing a sketch of the USS Texas, but I'm imagining that it's the Arizona. Because even though this isn't the exact same ship, it's awfully close. And when you stand here and you see how big it really is, I start to really get a sense of how big and powerful that explosion must have been to take this thing down.
Historian Kenneth Grubb gave a tour of the lower decks of the ship. This would be key to reproducing the storyboards exactly.
So this would be as close as it could possibly be to get on the Arizona would be right now, what we're looking at.
Absolutely. The Battleship Texas and the Arizona are not sister ships, but they are contemporaneous. A lot of the systems, a lot of the layout, a lot of the weaponry on board would have been exactly the same as it would have been on the Arizona.
Obviously, the sailors weren't wearing hard hats at the time, but why do we have to wear them?
Well, prior to World War II, there were actually height restrictions to be in the Navy. And on this particular ship, the average sailor only was about 5'7" during most of her service. This area would have been crew space and would have been living quarters for the average enlisted sailor.
Mm-hmm. And I noticed this looks like a very heavily armored deck.
Absolutely. The second and third decks of this ship are both armored decks.
How thick is this?
It's about 4 to 5 inches thick throughout most of the ship.
So when the armor-piercing shell went through the Arizona, it was ripping through plate just like this?
Absolutely.
Wow. God, 4 inches. That, I mean, you know.
And you'll notice that these are riveted deck plates. So you can see the rivet scars here. So in a lot of cases, these seams are spots of weakness that potentially the shell could have come down through on the Arizona.
The misconception that a bomb went down the smokestack could finally be put to rest. The USS Texas had the definitive proof that such a mythical shot would have been impossible.
These bars that you see on the deck levels are actually designed to detonate a bomb before it gets to the bottom of the ship, before it gets to the magazines, and can set that chain reaction.
So if one had hit a funnel, it would have blown up the funnel, particularly a big bomb like that, but it probably would not have gone down below.
Probably not. We are actually underwater as we speak. You're about knee-deep in water right now.
And this hatch here, what was here?
These hatches that are all in line are how you would bring ammunition from the main deck
down into the ammunition magazines and then feed the turrets.
So what was it?
Really the last picture taken of the Arizona in a kind of a formal way. She's in her navy gray, which would be a kind of a medium gray. She will be painted later that year with a measure paint scheme that will put her in a dark blue gray and also a light gray tops just above the smokestack. So she would look a little bit different. Quality here was the same on December 7th.
Everywhere you go on Pearl Harbor, history stares you in the face. The Navy ships were not the only targets. The Naval Air Station at Ford Island still carries a lot of...
Still here. It's just another example of the ghost that you find all these years later here at Pearl Harbor. It's amazing.
To achieve accuracy, Dr. Goldstein suggested a research trip to the National Park Service Archive, right there across from Battleship Row on Ford Island.
This is
running. I mean, there were 185 ships here.
I can't imagine it now, what it must have been like, you know, sitting out here. It's so peaceful.
You talk about peaceful, that's what the sailors talk about. It was a Sunday morning. They were getting ready for church services, Liberty, or maybe they had some light duty that day. It was Sunday in Hawaii. And this water that you see in its tranquil.
Those scars.
Apparently, Japanese fighter planes came right above this hangar here, firing bullets into this hangar. I mean, could you imagine being an 18, 19-year-old man in here on a Sunday morning? You know, you're not even on Battleship Row and bullets come flying in? I can't believe there's